You needed me to check?
No, we're good.
Okay.
We're actually recording right now. Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Bible Beyond the Basics podcast. This is episode 26. We are your hosts, the revered Bob Andrews, Pastor Jason.
Also revered.
We thank you for joining us once again. We're doing a two-part Advent series, so we're putting this out for you, and hopefully it'll be enough to get you through the holiday season. But last week we talked about the birth of Mary and
Birth of Jesus through Mary.
we don't know much about the birth of Mary, actually.
The pseudo-evangelical gospel of James, which came out in the Middle Ages, talks about Mary and all that sort of nonsense of the Immaculate Conception.
We should do that.
Sorry, Roman Catholics.
The birth of Jesus through the Virgin Mary we discussed last week. And this week is, I don't know, maybe more exciting, maybe less exciting. We're talking about their hotel accommodations at the time. Bob.
Yes.
My oldest daughter is 10, and I put her to bed most nights, and she has started this habit of she wants to sleep with as many stuffed animals as possible. She's got a sheep, she's got a giraffe. Those are some of the more pedestrian things. She's also got a unicorn. Her latest acquisition is a giant stuffed piece of avocado toast.
Okay.
This one she is absolutely in love with. And I think about her just going to bed at night surrounded by all of these animals. Mm-hmm. Bob, what would it be like to sleep next to a donkey?
Actually, I have.
Have you?
And a rooster. George Santos remembers fondly a rooster hopping up on the windowsill in the outback of Honduras at 3 o'clock every morning. I can also tell you how Steve Lewis woke up one morning with a tarantula making a nest in his head.
Oh, boy.
And yes, donkeys were nearby. And then the braying and the smell. But it's earthy.
Sure.
It's earthy. I grew up around toxins in New Jersey. It's kind of nice smelling manure.
Yeah. That is a little bit better.
From Rawway and all the chemical plants to petroleum plants to Lancaster County and the liquid manure they would spread out in the pig farms up on the hill.
We don't always think about what a privilege it is to have a calm environment to sleep in, a nice bed to lay your head down at night.
Yeah. Isn't that? Yeah, I've slept in some. I never know where we're going to go with this, but I've slept in some really uncomfortable places in my life.
What's the most uncomfortable place you've ever slept in?
Well, it was also the most fun. Actually, several times I've slept in pews.
Oh my goodness!
Where we're traveling or we're protesting. We were down in Washington D.C. And the churches would put us up and we'd sleep on the pews. I've actually. Okay, we're going to push the time on this one. The woman's drunk tank in Kentucky. So we were doing a bourbon tour with two buddies, and it was a bed and breakfast, the old county jail, and they didn't have anything, but they did have the old drunk tank.
Okay.
So they had the cots. I've slept on floors. You do what you got to do. I've slept on some uncomfortable places. And going cross country, sometimes with my buddy Frank, who likes camping out, and we had white sands. Sure. I remember sleeping out on rocks.
Yeah. I've slept on some of that and such, but I don't know. I don't know if I've slept too many places that are incredibly interesting, but when I went out to San Francisco with Pittsburgh Theological Seminary a few years ago, we stayed in the hotel where Kurt Cobain wrote a suicide note.
Oh, okay.
So that might be my most interesting sleeping experience. But
Yeah. And we're talking about Jesus and his first bed. And right now, as some people might be foreboding, Hallmark cards are going to sue me. Every children's cantata composer is going to sue me because, and I think you might be involved in the civil suit here, Jason, because I think you kind of leaned in the right direction. That totally debunks every St. Francis creche scene, Hallmark card about following a star in the sky that's beaming bright and the innkeeper and they're coming in late at night and nobody's going to welcome
Bob, are you
them.
trying to tell me that my preconceived notions about the Bible are not accurate? What? How could you?
It makes a great story, but it ain't biblical. So it got invented by St. Francis. I'm sorry.
And how much of our theology was invented by the saints so long ago? Mm-hmm. But yeah. Go ahead. I know Ken Bailey's going to be involved in this.
Well, it's because I listened and read a lot of Ken Bailey, who was a professor of the Near Eastern School Seminary in Beirut, and had a lot of real Mideastern focus to the whole concept of the whole Mideastern concept, interpreting the Bible in light of that culture, mm-hmm. which, if you go today to the Mideast and share our Christmas stories, they go, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
So it's actually a very Western kind of monasticized understanding of the birth of Jesus, mm-hmm. Which is not supported by the Bible.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a better story.
Yeah.
And that's the one I like to share. Now, I don't do it on Christmas Eve. I do other things on Christmas Eve.
I've heard about some of your Christmas Eves.
So, but if we really want to do some textual criticism and analysis of especially the Luke accounts, because Mark and John don't bother. They don't mm-hmm. really are interested in the birth story.
Matthew and Mark are trying to make theological statements about who Jesus is and such. And that's what all of the Gospels are really trying to do. They're not trying to be historical documents so much as, like it says at the end of the Gospel mm-hmm. of John, this is written so that you might believe. They're mm-hmm. documents that are meant to convince us to believe. Mm-hmm. But Luke is going into a little bit more of the detail there. He's trying to give some context, give some understanding, give some historical time frame in context to what's going on there. Yeah, and whereas Matthew picks up basically with Jesus, we have the story of Joseph. Then we get Jesus as a lad and what they have to do with Egypt and the story of the massacre of the innocents and that sort of thing in Herod. So that's where that's coming from with the Magi. Luke's account, if we really want to roll up our sleeves, well, let's start with the Star of Bethlehem. We tend to think of it as some sort of a flashlight in the sky that's directing mm-hmm. the Magi. Okay, if you really do the analysis, the Magi were astronomers, astrologers, and what you had was the likeliest scenario was not some sort of moving comet in the sky pointing out Jesus or something, but a rare triple conjunction in 7 BC of Jupiter, which is the star of Marduk, the supreme god of the Babylonians, Saturn, the star of kings, which took place in May, October, and December of 7 BC. And it was finally joined by Mars in the last of the conjunctions, the star of the west, Syria, Palestine, was star of war or conflict, in the constellation of Pisces, which is the constellation of wisdom, life, and creation. So actually, probably when we speak of the Star of Bethlehem, we're speaking of astrologers, astronomers projecting and interpreting what's going on in the cosmos, because that's what they believed.
Yeah. So that thing. But going more strictly to
Perfectly reasonable for that historical context.
Agreed. Yeah, the stars always shine and would bring forth a new king is being born, and that's why the astrologers were on the road, which would have been a long time. Well, actually, that is also in Luke. It would have taken a long time. We paint the idea of Mary arriving on a donkey. We have her arriving late at night.
We always put the three kings, as it were, right next to the manger scene. But really, if you're setting up a manger and you've got the wise men and you've got the family, you should probably put the wise men in the other room.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple rooms away if you're trying to get the historical context right.
But if you think theologically, again, if you haven't picked up anything in our talks here about the Bible, we think theologically. And the idea of you got shepherds. By the way, shepherds were the lowest class of all people. They were sort of like the migrant laborers. They would pick up the dirty jobs that nobody else wanted. And they're out in the fields at night because it's cooler at night.
So we can just really picture like Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs as the shepherd.
There you go.
That's an image for us. We can.
There you go. Yeah, he does. Well, to be a shepherd was and you'd have a couple of shepherds out there. They'd take, it's not as if families had huge flocks. They had a couple of sheep, and they all knew their sheep. But there in the manger scene, what's theologically significant is also then you have the fellows that came from Harvard or Oxford, from Persia, who are the brightest and the best. And they are both, Jews and Gentiles, both worshiping.
And isn't that astonishing? To be someone who just has the time and the resources to be able to just, there's a star in the sky, I'm going to follow it. That's certainly talking of someone who has, is coming from a very particular place in society. But it's incredible that even at Jesus' birth, it brings together, the poor and the rich, people from different cultures. There is no Greek, there is no Gentile, there is no man or woman, but all are equal in God.
Right. And who's the villain? The most powerful king. The political and religious leaders are the villains. One of the great stories is Herodium, which would have been in eyeshot of Bethlehem, Herod's great palace. And so you have this incredibly interesting contrast between the huge palace of Herodium outside Bethlehem and Jesus, the new king, being born in ordinary life, which is the best part of the story. We have the idea that there was no room at the inn. Well, a Jew wouldn't go to an inn anyway. For two reasons. One, inns were where Gentiles went, and so therefore it was a place where unclean people would go. Number two, there is absolutely no way on earth a Jew would ever exclude another Jew from coming to their home. The sacredness of hospitality, especially family hospitality. We're going to experience that in Fort Collins. We've experienced it whenever we travel back to New Jersey. And family will always make room for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got an air mattress or two. You can sleep over here, or we'll give up our bed. So there's absolutely no way Joseph's blood family would have refused them accommodation.
We just talked about in the last podcast episode about how family is so important in Jewish culture. Talking about, the reason why it wasn't a good thing to be a virgin was because you wanted to have a family, because you wanted to procreate and continue on the kingdom of God. And so this carries over here. The idea is that, they are going to do their best to put them up in the best accommodations that they possibly can.
Right. And so, okay, just that changes some of the narrative. There was no innkeeper. And we'll get to that in a second about something else. The other passage that's quite telling is when the time came for her to be delivered. When the time came, she delivered. The verb form indicate they've been there a while. So that would mitigate against the assumption that they arrive late at night, like I've done. I remember outside Memphis looking for a hotel really late at night, and I got the worst place possible. That would not have been the case.
Yeah.
My scenario that I like to paint is that, okay, Mary's got pregnant. We're up in Nazareth. Joseph wants to quietly divorce her, but he's going to protect her. He gets her out of town. Where does she go? She goes to her cousin, who is outside Jerusalem, in Bethany, her cousin Elizabeth. And there you have that incredible, interesting encounter between Elizabeth, who is also pregnant 6 months earlier, before Mary. And then I project Joseph coming, picking her up, and then bringing her into Bethlehem to be with his family, because of the requirement that was excised or enforced by Quirinius and the governor for the taxation and tabulation of the population. And so they're staying at the house. The time came when she was to be delivered. So they're already settled in. And then we're told Jesus was laid in a manger because there was no room in the inn. Now, I've been to Israel a long time ago. You've been more recently. Did you ever go into a regular person's country rural home?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you describe it?
I mean, they use different building materials for one thing. They use clay often instead of the materials that we have, but people are going to use things that are relative to the land, and that's what most things were made of in the area. It was a couple stories tall. I'm not sure. I don't think that the house that we stayed in was exactly the same as what this was like. I think I know what you're getting to.
Well, the top and the bottom. What was it? Was the top flat or roofed?
The top was flat. Yeah.
Okay. Why do they have flat tops?
I'm not actually sure.
For sleeping.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool nights. Which also, by the way, changes our understanding of when this is happening. It's probably happening in spring. Because that's when you can take the sheep out at night. They often slept on mats on the roof because it was cooler than inside. Which then leads us to another question. What's a manger? Did you ever see a manger in any of these homes?
I did not.
Okay.
No.
So Ken Bailey, I haven't either. Ken Bailey describes them. What is a manger? It's a feeding trough.
And when I read, he probably writes about this multiple times, but the book that I read when he talked about the manger, he talked about the particular houses, and I didn't see this, but he talked about the houses being built into like the sides of mountains, the sides of whatever was around, just for the natural defense that was there. The lower section, at least in this time, would have, it would just be basically where the animals would live.
Exactly.
But it would kind of be like the pets of the home. They would wander in, they would wander out, and the people lived on the second floor.
Right. A manger would have been built in on the bottom floor. One half would have been for the pets, or the lambs, or the livestock, the sheep, the goats, whatever you had.
The pets had functional purposes.
They
were
did
just
indeed.
like cats, but you want milk in the morning. Well, what better way to get milk than to have your, goat just living right in the downstairs of your house?
Right, because the downstairs is where things happened. So the downstairs would have the barn area and then a raised platform, a raised wall, half wall, in which the feeding troughs would have been carved out of stone so that the animals could come over and lean over and eat. That's the manger. It's the feeding trough. The rest of that floor, which would have been a little bit elevated to keep the animals from walking around in the kitchen. That's where they would do the cooking. I've seen that in Honduras, very similar, where you have a wood fire or coal fires. And the animals come and go all the time. And so, not pigs, because they're Jewish. So, he was laid in the manger because there was no room for him in the inn.
Yeah.
Well, this is where it also gets interesting. The word is pandoxion when it refers to the inn in the Good Samaritan story. This Luke uses the word katalumati, which elsewhere means the guest room. So Jesus was laid as a newborn baby in the manger, the feeding trough, because there was no room for Mary to give birth in the guest room. Why the guest room? Because it was already occupied. Jesus was born in the kitchen, surrounded by loving family.
It's a very different picture than what we have. So what does that say to us theologically?
What better place for Jesus to be born? He wasn't abandoned. They weren't desolate. The Son of God, the Son of David, the Son of Man, was born into the very center of our lives, which in most homes is going to be the kitchen. Mom would always invite us one by one to sit at the kitchen table, and we always had to say, okay, Mom's inviting us in to have a kitchen talk. How are you doing, Bob? Are things okay? The kitchen is where life happens.
Yeah.
That's the presence, the center is Jesus.
And isn't it telling, in the kitchen dining room, the words are similarly related, but I think we can think of it as one space. But, we think of Jesus coming into the world in the kitchen, in the place where people gather for fellowship, but we also think of, Jesus's final meal with his disciples as he breaks the bread, as he pours the cup, also once again happening in the kitchen, in the dining area, in the midst of so much of the ministry of Jesus happens around the kitchen, the meal table, eating, fellowship, being together.
Yeah, that wonderful riddle from the storyteller, how do you bring a family together? You break bread. So especially with the holidays coming up, folks, let's rethink this, because there's a kicker line. When the shepherds do arrive, as they've been bidden, and they tell the story of what they were told, and all who heard it were amazed at what they had been told. Okay, well, if it's a stable and it's just Joseph and Mary, all who heard it, who are they?
How long are they staying at this hotel?
Okay, so they're not hidden in a stable alone. They're surrounded by grandma.
Yeah.
All who heard it were amazed.
They're in the neighborhood. The neighbors are stopping by. They're kibitzing with each other. Your language tells you a lot about who you are as a person. And, Eskimos have more words for snow than anything else. The English language has more words for money than anything else. Hebrew has several words for conversation. And so that's what they're doing. They're eating together. They're sharing together. They're being this family together.
Yeah, we tend to have rather pristine concepts of birth. The Hebrews, no, I mean, everybody would have been there. All the women helping out, and then the men arrive and they celebrate, and it's a joyous time because all who heard it were amazed, all of them. So what we think theologically as we enter these holiday seasons. Where should Jesus be? But in the kitchen with us and us celebrating and welcoming and receiving him.
Yeah.
And all that he brings and what we can celebrate together and cherish together, because quite frankly, the money comes and goes.
Yeah.
All we got is each other.
So often we talk about as Christians, we say, how can we make Jesus the center of this holiday that we celebrate? And I think about, what do we do at Christmas time? We put Santa everywhere. We put all these lights up. And I just think to myself, I don't want Jesus to be the center of everything in the same way that we put so much of our commercial stuff the center of things. Do we want Jesus to replace Santa? Do we want stuffed Jesuses at the mall? Do we want Jesus on our slippers? No, that's not what it means. What it means is that in the midst of all we're doing, we're experiencing fellowship with one another. We're recalling Jesus' life and commandments and calling for us and experiencing that fellowship together as we gather around that table, as we gather in the kitchen.
Yeah, what finer memories and hopes that we have. I've shared this before. One of the reasons I got involved with the Gatehouse was, quite frankly, two of our children, if it weren't for family, would have been homeless and on the streets. Well, the reality is, if it weren't for family, I don't think I'd have my home here in Danville. What is this all about? What is it alone that really lasts? What should we truly celebrate this time? And to me, the story of Jesus being born in the kitchen not just exemplifies and symbolizes that, it proves it. That's what God is about.
Yeah. What an incredible story for us during this Advent season. God bless everyone. Have a wonderful Christmas holiday. We'll see you again in January.
God bless.